I'll give you $100,000 if you serve me in Chinese. Richard Blackstone snapped his fingers at the young black waitress like summoning a dog. The tech CEO didn't bother looking up from his phone, his voice dripping with mockery. Actually, scratch that. He finally raised his eyes, scanning her from head to toe with disgust. I'll settle for broken Chinese. Hell, I'll take monkey sounds if that's all you can manage. He pulled out his wallet and threw 500s on the marble table like scraps. Because we both know the only language you people really speak is, would you like fries with that? The Chinese tech mogul's chopsticks clattered to his plate. The Japanese automotive CEO's face went ashen. Every executive at the table stared in horrified silence. Richard leaned back, his smirk vicious. Come on, sweetheart, earn your tip. Keisha Williams stood frozen, humiliation burning in her chest. Have you ever been so degraded that your humanity became someone's entertainment? For 3 seconds, the private dining room held its breath. Keisha Williams stood perfectly still, her dark eyes processing the insult that hung in the air like poison. The Chinese tech mogul shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The German pharmaceutical executive cleared his throat. Even the waitstaff lingering near the service station had gone silent, watching this public humiliation unfold. Richard Blackstone reached for his champagne, already dismissing her. That's what I thought. Maybe stick to refilling water glasses. But something shifted in Keisha's posture. Her spine straightened, her grip on the serving tray steadied. The trembling stopped. She set the tray down with deliberate precision on the marble side table. The soft click echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Then she spoke. Her voice transformed completely as flawless Mandarin flowed from her lips, each syllable perfectly pronounced with the refined accent of educated Beijing. She addressed the Chinese executive directly, discussing tonight's menu with the cultural respect and formality appropriate for his status. Good evening, honored sir. I'm delighted to serve you tonight. Our chef has prepared French foie gras paired with premium Japanese sake and imported German black truffle pasta. Which flavor profile would best suit your distinguished palate? Richard's champagne glass froze halfway to his mouth. His phone slipped from his other hand, clattering onto the table. The Chinese mogul's eyes widened in shock. He responded in rapid Mandarin, clearly testing her fluency. Without missing a beat, Keisha matched his pace, discussing preparation methods and cultural significance with sophisticated vocabulary that impressed even him. The Japanese CEO leaned forward. The German executive set down his fork entirely. The entire table stared as this simple waitress conducted a business-level conversation that would challenge most professional interpreters. Richard's face was drained of color. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The other diners in the restaurant had stopped eating entirely. Phones appeared, recording this unexpected linguistic display. But this was just the beginning of what Richard Blackstone was about to discover about the woman he'd tried to humiliate. Marcus Brooks emerged from the kitchen, drawn by the unusual silence that had fallen over his restaurant. The executive chef's eyes widened as he heard sophisticated Mandarin flowing from his waitress, words he'd never heard her speak in 8 months of working together. Richard Blackstone slammed his champagne glass down, champagne splashing onto the white tablecloth. Lucky guess, anyone can memorize a few phrases. His voice carried the desperate edge of a man watching his worldview crumble. Let's try French then, sweetheart. Without missing a beat, Keisha's voice shifted like water flowing into a new channel. Perfect Parisian French rolled off her tongue as she addressed the luxury brand executive about wine pairings with the sophistication of a master sommelier. Certainly, monsieur. Would you prefer our Burgundian selection to complement the duck confit, or perhaps something more adventurous from the Loire Valley? The French executive's eyebrows shot up. He fired back in rapid, colloquial French, testing her with street expressions and regional slang. Keisha matched him effortlessly, even incorporating Marseillaise dialect that made him laugh with delight. Impossible, Richard muttered, his face reddening. Spanish, then. Keisha flowed into warm, melodic Spanish. But she didn't stop there. She switched between different regional dialects. Argentinian for discussing beef preparation, Mexican for explaining spice profiles, Peninsular Spanish for wine regions. Each transition was seamless, natural. A nearby table of Latin American diplomats turned to listen, impressed murmurs rippling through their conversation in Spanish. Marcus approached the table, speaking to Keisha in Korean. She responded with perfect fluency, her tone shifting to match the formal register appropriate for addressing a respected elder in Korean culture. Richard was standing now, his voice rising with each failed attempt to stump her. German, Italian, try those! Keisha addressed the pharmaceutical executive in precise, clinical German about dietary restrictions and allergen protocols. Then she turned to another guest, flowing into melodic Italian while describing the chef's techniques with the passion of someone who understood both language and cuisine. "This is ridiculous," Richard sputtered. She's probably studied these specific phrases. "Japanese," called out the automotive CEO, genuine curiosity replacing skepticism. Keisha bowed slightly, the exact angle appropriate for business settings, and began discussing umami principles and presentation philosophy in flawless Japanese. Her vocabulary included technical culinary terms that impressed even the native speaker. Other diners had abandoned their meals entirely. Phones appeared across the restaurant, recording this unprecedented linguistic performance. The sommelier paused mid-pour. Busboys stopped clearing tables. "Arabic," whispered someone from the UAE delegation at an adjacent table. Keisha turned gracefully, switching to flowing Arabic as she explained halal preparation methods and Middle Eastern flavor profiles that would complement the evening's offerings. Finally, she spotted the elderly Russian businessman dining alone near the window. In gentle, poetic Russian, she welcomed him with the warmth reserved for honored elders, asking about his evening and his preferences. The old man's eyes filled with tears. He clutched his napkin, overwhelmed to hear his native language spoken with such beauty and respect. 9 languages. 9 perfect, fluent, culturally appropriate conversations. Each transition is as effortless as breathing. The Chinese mogul leaned back in his chair, stunned. "Extraordinary," he murmured in English. Marcus raised his hand, his voice cutting through the amazed whispers with quiet authority. "I think that's quite sufficient." But Richard wasn't finished. His face had gone from red to purple, his privilege under assault. "This is clearly some kind of setup," he declared to the table. "Chen planted her here. No waitress." "Sir," Marcus interrupted, his tone respectful but firm. "I've worked with Keisha for 8 months. I had absolutely no idea she possessed these abilities." The restaurant buzzed with excitement. Videos were already uploaded to social media. Language Genius began trending in real time. Richard stared at Keisha as if seeing a ghost. This wasn't supposed to happen. People like her weren't supposed to be people like this. The woman he'd tried to humiliate stood before him, dignity intact, having just demonstrated intellectual capabilities that dwarfed most of his executive team. But who was she really? And how had someone with such extraordinary gifts ended up serving tables in his world of privilege and power? The questions hung in the air like smoke, waiting for answers that would shatter even more assumptions. The camera held on Keisha's composed face as the restaurant buzzed around her, her quiet dignity unshaken despite the spectacle she'd just created. Keisha Williams wasn't supposed to be here. 3 years ago, she was Dr. Williams, almost. Columbia University's star linguistics student, the one professors whispered about in faculty lounges. PhD track in applied linguistics, specializing in simultaneous interpretation, the kind of brilliant mind that universities build their reputations on. She'd spent countless nights in Butler Library, surrounded by towering stacks of linguistic textbooks. Phonetics, morphology, sociolinguistics, she devoured them all. Her thesis advisor called her work groundbreaking. Her professors predicted she'd revolutionize the field. 9 languages flowed through her mind like music. She was working on her 10th. But life doesn't care about your potential when your family needs you now. The phone call came during her comprehensive exams, stage 3 breast cancer. Her mother, the elementary school teacher who'd raised her alone after her father died, needed treatment that insurance wouldn't fully cover. $250,000, maybe more. Keisha stared at the acceptance letter for her fully funded PhD program. Full ride, research assistantship, everything she'd worked for. Then she looked at her mother's medical bills spreading across their kitchen table like fallen leaves. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Marcus Brooks watched this young woman who just stunned his restaurant, recognizing something in her eyes he knew too well. The same determined resilience he'd carried 25 years ago when he arrived from Taiwan with engineering degrees no American company would recognize. In her staff locker, hidden behind her uniform, sat a worn copy of Fundamentals of Linguistic Theory, dog-eared, highlighted, loved, a talisman of deferred dreams. The book's pages were filled with margin notes in 4 different languages, plans for research that would never happen, ideas that would gather dust while she counted tips and serve people who saw only her uniform. But dreams don't die when circumstances change them, they just wait, patient as seeds in winter soil for the right moment to grow again. Tonight, in this golden-lit dining room 40 floors above the city, that moment had finally arrived. Marcus Brooks made a decision that would change everything. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd earned respect through decades of excellence. "Mr. Blackstone, I believe you made a financial commitment to this young lady." Richard scoffed, his privilege showing like an ugly scar. "I was obviously being rhetorical. Nobody carries that kind of cash to a dinner meeting." Marcus reached into his jacket and produced his business checkbook, the leather worn smooth from years of building his empire one transaction at a time. "I do, and I'd like to propose that we make this more interesting." The challenge crystallized like ice forming on glass. Could Keisha handle a full international business negotiation? Not just taking orders, but interpreting between cultures, bridging gaps that could make or break million-dollar deals. Marcus was already on his phone, calling contacts. "Henri, it's Marcus. I need you at the hotel in 20 minutes. Yes, bring your finest Bordeaux selection. Trust me." Within minutes, the private dining room transformed into an impromptu United Nations assembly. The French wine consultant arrived with leather cases of vintage bottles. Richard's German legal counsel appeared, summoned from another meeting. The stakes hung in the air like smoke. Success meant Richard paid the $100,000. Failure meant Marcus covered the entire table, $15,000, and issued a public apology to his international guests. Keisha accepted without hesitation. What followed was a masterclass in cultural diplomacy. She didn't just translate words, she translated worlds. When the German executive spoke with typical directness about contract terms, Keisha explained to the Chinese mogul that this wasn't rudeness, but cultural respect. Germans believed in honesty over politeness. When the Japanese CEO remained silent during negotiations, she clarified to the Americans that this wasn't disinterest, but thoughtful consideration. In Japanese culture, quick decisions showed disrespect for the magnitude of the commitment. The French consultant wanted to discuss wine philosophy. Keisha facilitated a conversation between him and the Chinese executive about how terroir reflected cultural values, how the patience required for aging wine paralleled the long-term thinking that built lasting business relationships. Business cards began flowing like water. The Chinese investors asked Marcus if Keisha was available for consulting on their American expansion. The German consul whispered to his assistant to research cultural interpretation services. But Richard wasn't ready to surrender his worldview. "This is clearly orchestrated," he declared, pulling Marcus aside. "You planted her here. No waitress just happens to speak 9 languages fluently." Marcus's response was measured, patient. "I've worked with Keisha for 8 months. I had absolutely no idea she possessed these abilities." The truth landed like a physical blow. Richard's certainty about the world, about who belonged where, about what people were capable of based on their circumstances, cracked like ice under pressure. 25 years of privilege had taught him that talent looked a certain way, came from certain places, wore certain clothes. Keisha's existence challenged every assumption he'd built his identity on. Meanwhile, the negotiation continued flowing around them. Keisha moved between languages like a conductor leading an orchestra, each cultural note perfectly timed, every transition seamless. The room buzzed with energy. Other diners had abandoned their meals to watch this linguistic symphony unfold. Videos spread across social media platforms. The restaurant staff gathered at respectful distances, witnessing something extraordinary. But the German lawyer's comment, spoken in German and assumed to be private, would shatter the last of Richard's resistance. This woman is more qualified than most interpreters at the United Nations. Keisha's response, delivered in perfect German with a slight smile, echoed across the suddenly silent room. You're very kind to say so. The laughter that followed wasn't mockery. It was wonder, appreciation, recognition of excellence that had been hiding in plain sight. Richard's world was collapsing one assumption at a time. He grabbed Marcus by the elbow, pulling him toward the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows where the city lights blurred like tears. This is impossible. You orchestrated this whole thing. His voice carried the desperation of a man watching his certainties crumble. There's no way a waitress just happens to speak 9 languages. You planted her here to embarrass me. Marcus's response was steady, patient as granite. Richard, I've worked with Keisha for 8 months. Until tonight, I thought she spoke English and maybe some Spanish. I had no idea. The words hit Richard like physical blows. His face flushed deeper red as the implications sank in. If Marcus was telling the truth, and his genuine shock seemed undeniable, then everything Richard believed about the world was wrong. Behind them, Keisha continued orchestrating cultural conversations that were turning a simple dinner into an international summit. But Richard couldn't process her success. His mind raced through alternatives, desperate explanations that would preserve his worldview. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm calling Colombia. This is fake. She's probably some actor you hired. Across the dining room, the restaurant staff watched with mixed emotions. Some beamed with pride. Their colleague was extraordinary. Others shifted uncomfortably, wondering why someone so brilliant was working alongside them. Maria, another server, whispered to James, the sous chef, if she's so smart, why is she here with us? James, who'd immigrated from El Salvador with a teaching degree no one would recognize, understood deeper truths. Maybe smart people don't always get smart opportunities. Maybe the world takes time to make room. Richard's phone calls began producing results that shattered his remaining defenses. Columbia's Dean of Linguistics remembered Keisha instantly. Exceptional student, one of our finest. We were devastated when financial circumstances forced her to leave the doctoral program. Financial circumstances. The words echoed in Richard's mind like mockery. He'd never faced a choice between dreams and survival. Every door had opened for him. Prep school connections, family money, inherited privilege paving his way to success. His prejudice shifted forms like a virus adapting to treatment. If she's so educated, why is she serving tables? Something doesn't add up. Marcus overheard, his voice carrying steel wrapped in silk. Same reason my father cleaned office buildings with an engineering degree from Beijing. Sometimes the world doesn't make space for talent immediately. The restaurant buzzed around them. Videos of Keisha's linguistic display were going viral in real time. Language genius trended globally. Comments poured in from linguists, business leaders, educators, all recognizing the extraordinary demonstration they'd witnessed. But Richard's discomfort deepened. Accepting Keisha's brilliance meant confronting uncomfortable truths about his own success. How much of his achievement came from merit versus circumstance? How many Keishas had he overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated throughout his career? The cognitive dissonance was unbearable. Everything he'd been taught about meritocracy, about who deserved success and why, was crumbling around him. Meanwhile, Keisha continued her cultural diplomacy with grace that seemed effortless. She'd faced this skepticism before. The disbelief, the desperate search for flaws, the refusal to accept that excellence could emerge from unexpected places. She let her abilities speak louder than their doubts. The Chinese mogul was deep in conversation with the German executive, barriers dissolving under Keisha's patient translation. The Japanese CEO smiled, actually smiled, as cultural misunderstandings evaporated through her careful explanations. Business was happening. Real, substantial, profitable business that wouldn't have been possible without her intervention. But Richard stood frozen by the windows, staring at his own reflection in the glass, no longer recognizing the man looking back at him. The evening was far from over, and his education in humility was just beginning. The international business dinner had evolved into something unprecedented, a masterclass in cultural diplomacy with Keisha as the unexpected professor. She moved between conversations like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, each cultural note perfectly timed. This wasn't just a translation anymore. This was a transformation. The Chinese tech mogul had been growing increasingly frustrated with the German pharmaceutical executive's blunt communication style. Cultural offense was building like storm clouds, threatening to derail potential partnerships worth hundreds of millions. Keisha intervened with surgical precision. Speaking to the Chinese executive in Mandarin, she explained that German directness wasn't disrespect, but the highest form of cultural honor. In their culture, speaking indirectly suggests you believe the other person cannot handle truth. Directness shows they consider you an equal, worthy of honesty. The mogul's expression shifted from irritation to understanding. He nodded slowly, processing this cultural insight that no business school had taught him. To the German executive, she explained in his native language that Chinese business culture valued relationship building over immediate results. When he appears to avoid direct answers, he's not being evasive. He's ensuring the foundation is strong enough to support long-term partnership. The tension that had been building for an hour dissolved in minutes. The business deals began expanding organically. The original $2.8 billion technology partnership swelled to $4.2 billion as communication barriers crumbled. New possibilities emerged that had been hidden in translation gaps. The Japanese automotive CEO, initially silent and seemingly disengaged, began actively participating once Keisha explained to the Americans that his thoughtful pauses weren't indecision, but consensus building, a cultural requirement that actually strengthened final commitments. Word spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Other diners began approaching, requesting Keisha's assistance with their own international guests. A Japanese couple at table 12 had been struggling with dietary restrictions, pointing helplessly at the menu. Keisha appeared at their side, speaking warm, respectful Japanese. Their faces lit up with relief and gratitude as she explained each dish with cultural context they could understand. An elderly Russian businessman dining alone near the windows looked up as Keisha greeted him in flowing, poetic Russian. Tears filled his eyes. He confided it'd been months since anyone had spoken to him in his native language. He'd forgotten how much he missed the sound of home. The restaurant transformed before their eyes. What had been a place of mere service became a hub of human connection spanning continents and cultures. Marcus watched his establishment's reputation elevate in real time. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications as videos spread across social media platforms. Reservation requests poured in from international clients specifically requesting the multilingual cultural expert. Business cards flowed toward Keisha like autumn leaves. Consulting offers, speaking invitations, cultural liaison positions, academic opportunities. The German executive texted his UN contacts. The Japanese CEO called his cultural affairs team. But the moment that broke everyone's heart happened when the elderly Russian man shared that Keisha reminded him of his late daughter, who had also been a linguist studying at Moscow University. Speaking in Russian, he told her, "You have her gift, not just for languages, but for touching souls across every barrier that divides us." Keisha's response, delivered with genuine warmth, transcended professional skill and entered the realm of human compassion. She wasn't just demonstrating linguistic ability anymore. She was proving that cultural intelligence could heal wounds and build bridges between isolated hearts. The business deal that had started the evening worth $2.8 billion now approached $5 billion as new consortium partners expressed interest, drawn by the sophisticated cultural competency they'd witnessed. Richard stood by the windows, watching his intended humiliation transform into Keisha's global debut. His smartphone buzzed with notifications as the video spread internationally, but this was only the beginning of what the evening would cost him, and what it would give back. Marcus Brooks approached the small microphone near the restaurant's sound system, his movements deliberate and commanding. The conversations gradually quieted as his voice filled the dining room with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention for a moment." The room fell silent. Even the kitchen staff paused their work, sensing something significant was about to unfold. Marcus stood with the dignity of someone who had earned every ounce of respect he commanded. 25 years ago, I arrived in America from Taiwan with engineering degrees that no company would recognize. I spent 3 years washing dishes in restaurants much smaller than this one. His voice gained strength, each word carrying the weight of lived experience. I know extraordinary talent when I see it because I know exactly what it looks like when the world overlooks that talent. Keisha's breath caught. She hadn't expected this public recognition, this validation from someone whose opinion mattered more than applause. Keisha Williams, Marcus continued, turning to face her directly. I'm offering you the position of Director of International Guest Relations, effective immediately. The salary will reflect your actual qualifications, not your current role. The restaurant erupted in genuine applause. The international executives stood, clapping with the appreciation of people who understood excellence when they witnessed it. But Marcus wasn't finished. More importantly, I'm offering you something I wish someone had offered me decades ago, a complete educational partnership. Flexible scheduling, financial support, and whatever resources you need to complete your doctoral degree while building your career here. Keisha's composure finally cracked. Not from sadness, but from being truly seen for the first time in years. Her hand went to her throat, overwhelmed by recognition that felt like oxygen after years of holding her breath. Marcus reached into his jacket and produced an elegant business card holder. Simple sterling silver, professional, beautiful. He placed it in her hands with the ceremony it deserved. Talent doesn't wither in the right environment, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. It grows exponentially. The endorsement created an immediate domino effect. The Japanese CEO stood, offering cultural consulting for their American expansion. The German executive provided UN interpretation program connections on the spot. The Chinese mogul suggested advisory positions with international firms. But the moment that broke everyone's heart came when Marcus's phone buzzed. He answered briefly, then smiled. Keisha, there's someone who wants to speak with you. He handed her the phone. On FaceTime, her mother's face appeared, gaunt from treatment but radiant with pride. Marcus had arranged the call from her hospital room. I always knew, baby, her mother whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I always knew the world would see what I see. The restaurant fell completely silent. Even Richard, standing by the windows, felt the emotional weight of this moment. A mother watching her daughter's dreams finally take flight. The linguistics textbook in Keisha's locker was no longer a relic of abandoned hopes. It was a roadmap to resume destiny, a bridge between past dreams and present possibilities. As the applause continued, business cards multiplied in her hands. International guests began planning return visits specifically to work with her. The sommelier approached me about wine consulting opportunities. But the question hanging in the golden air remained. How would Richard respond to this public celebration of the woman he'd tried to destroy? Amidst the congratulations and business card exchanges, Keisha stepped onto the restaurant's outdoor terrace. The cool evening air felt like relief against her skin. Below, the city sprawled like scattered diamonds, beautiful and distant. She needed a moment to process what had just happened. Her life had changed in the span of an hour, but the weight of it felt surreal. Footsteps approached behind her. The elderly Russian businessman appeared in the doorway, moving with the careful dignity of someone who had learned that life's most precious moments required gentle handling. May I join you? He asked in English, his accent thick but his manner respectful. Keisha nodded and he approached the railing beside her. I must tell you something, he said, his voice soft against the city's distant hum. I was a literature professor at Moscow University for 30 years. I came to America with my daughter. She was pursuing linguistics like you. His hands gripped the railing, knuckles white with emotion. Cancer took her 2 years ago. She was 26. Keisha's heart clenched. The parallel was too close, too painful. When you spoke Russian to me tonight, his voice broke slightly. For a moment, I heard Katya's voice again. The same love for languages, the same gift for making words become bridges between hearts. He reached into his jacket and produced a small, worn book of Russian poetry. The leather cover was soft with age, the pages yellowed with love and use. This was her favorite collection. Pushkin, Akhmatova, Brodsky, the poets who taught her that language could heal the world's wounds. He pressed the book into Keisha's hands. She would have wanted another language lover to have it. Keisha accepted this gift with reverence, feeling its weight, not just physical but emotional. This was grief transformed into legacy, loss becoming a gift. Language is how we touch souls across every barrier that divides us, he whispered. You have her gift. Use it to heal what others have broken. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who understood that some connections transcend culture, age, and circumstance. In the golden light spilling from the restaurant, Keisha realized her worth had never depended on others' recognition. It existed in every moment she used her gifts to bridge divides and ease loneliness. Through the glass doors, Richard Blackstone watched this interaction with growing understanding. He witnessed genuine human connection that had nothing to do with money, status, or power. This was about souls recognizing each other across the vastness of human experience. The Russian professor kissed Keisha's forehead with grandfatherly tenderness. Some people are born to build walls. Others are born to build bridges. You, my dear, are a bridge. The poetry book warm in her hands, Keisha finally understood her true value. As Keisha and the professor returned inside, Richard Blackstone approached them with visible internal struggle. His arrogance had cracked like ice under pressure, revealing something almost human underneath. I owe you an apology that I'm not sure I'm capable of giving adequately, he began, his voice stripped of its earlier condescension. Before Keisha could respond, his phone erupted with the sharp urgency of crisis. The ringtone cut through the restaurant's warm ambiance like a fire alarm. Blackstone, he answered, his face immediately draining of color. What do you mean they're at the airport? The conversation that followed was conducted in desperate whispers, but the panic in Richard's voice carried across the dining room. His hands shook as he gripped the phone. How long ago? 40 minutes? Jesus Christ! He ended the call and stood frozen, staring at the device as if it contained a bomb. My company's largest client, he explained to Marcus and Keisha, his voice hollow. Nakamura Technologies. $180 million in annual revenue. They're at JFK right now, boarding their flight back to Tokyo. The crisis unfolded like a nightmare in real time. 3 years of relationship building, countless meetings, cultural exchanges, trust carefully constructed, all of it evaporating because of a catastrophic misunderstanding in their latest expansion negotiations. The contract language, Richard continued, his privilege replaced by genuine desperation. We structured the proposal in a way that suggested they were the junior partner. In Japanese business culture, that's not just insulting, it's relationship ending. His usual corporate interpreter was unreachable, dealing with a family emergency. His business attorney spoke no Japanese. The cultural liaison firm he'd used before wanted $50,000 for emergency consultation with no guarantee of success. $180 million in annual revenue, Richard repeated, the number falling from his lips like a prayer. If they get on that plane, it's over. 3 years of work, gone. Marcus watched this powerful man crumble before his eyes. What do you need? Richard's gaze shifted to Keisha, swallowing what remained of his pride like broken glass. I need her help. I'll pay whatever she asks. Keisha's response surprised everyone, including herself. I don't want your money, Mr. Blackstone, but I do want something from you. Name it. Your commitment to actively recruit and promote multilingual talent from underrepresented communities in all your future international operations. Make it company policy. Richard nodded without hesitation. Done. Anything else? Prove you mean it. Within 30 minutes, the Japanese executives had agreed to return to the hotel for one final negotiation attempt. But their conditions were stark. Richard had to provide cultural competency at the highest level, or the relationship was permanently severed. When the Nakamura Technologies delegation entered the private dining room, the tension was suffocating. These weren't just business partners. They were relationships built over years, now hanging by threads thinner than silk. Keisha spent the first 20 minutes exclusively in Japanese with the executives, rebuilding trust through proper apology protocols. This wasn't just saying sorry, it was demonstrating understanding of the specific cultural violation and showing respect for their position. She navigated between formal Japanese for respect, casual Japanese for relationship rebuilding, and technical business Japanese for negotiation, each transition timed with perfect cultural sensitivity. The real challenge emerged, restructuring the entire business proposal to honor Japanese concepts of partnership equality while maintaining American efficiency expectations. This required more than translation. It demanded cultural architecture, rebuilding the framework of how both companies understood the relationship. "Mr. Nakamura," Keisha said in Japanese, "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about intentions versus presentation. May I explain how American directness reflects respect for your intelligence, not dismissal of your status?" What followed was 45 minutes of cultural mediation that would later become a Harvard Business School case study. Keisha didn't just translate words, she translated worldviews, helping each side understand that their differences weren't obstacles but opportunities. The breakthrough came when she explained to the Americans that Japanese business culture viewed quick decisions as disrespectful to the magnitude of commitment. To the Japanese executives, she clarified that American urgency reflected enthusiasm, not impatience. The magic happened gradually. Tensions dissolved. Smiles appeared. Business cards were exchanged with renewed respect. Then came the plot twist that stunned everyone. "William-san," the lead Japanese executive said in English, addressing Keisha directly, "our company would like to offer you a consulting contract, cultural liaison for all our American operations, $150,000 annually." Richard watched his business not only saved, but transformed by the woman he'd initially tried to humiliate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present, but the Japanese CEO's closing wisdom delivered the final blow to Richard's worldview. In our culture, we say, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down." But sometimes the nail that sticks out is actually a rare diamond that was hiding beneath the surface. He looked directly at Richard. "Your employee is such a diamond." The deal didn't just survive, it flourished. The partnership expanded from $180 million to $300 million annually, with cultural consulting services added to their existing technology agreement. Richard stood before both business teams, his transformation from skeptic to advocate complete. "I learned something tonight that should have been obvious. Intelligence doesn't wear the uniform we expect. Excellence doesn't arrive with the credentials we think we recognize." But his ultimate moment of reckoning came with his announcement. "I'm establishing the Cultural Bridge Scholarship Program. $500,000 in initial funding for multilingual students from underrepresented backgrounds, starting with Dr. Williams' complete doctoral education." The Japanese executive's diamond metaphor began trending on business social media within hours. Videos of the cultural mediation spread internationally as a masterclass in cross-cultural competency. As applause filled the dining room, Keisha realized she had not only saved Richard's business, she had transformed it into something better than it had ever been. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that recognition didn't create her worth. Her worth had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to shine. 2 months later, the Meridian Grand Hotel glowed like a beacon against the night sky. The International Cultural Appreciation Evening had transformed the entire 40th floor into a celebration of cross-cultural understanding in business. Keisha Williams stood at the podium in elegant professional attire, her new title displayed prominently on the program. Dr. Keisha Williams, PhD candidate, Director of International Relations. The audience before her represented power at its highest levels: ambassadors, Fortune 500 CEOs, university deans, and cultural leaders from 6 continents. Her keynote speech about language as economic bridge building drew from her personal journey while providing actionable insights for international business. Every word carried the weight of lived experience transformed into wisdom. "Language isn't just about vocabulary and grammar," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal-clear sound system. "It's about seeing the complete human being behind those words and building bridges strong enough to support our shared dreams." The applause was sustained, genuine, the kind reserved for truth-telling that changes perspectives. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. Richard Blackstone approached the stage carrying a large ceremonial check. But this wasn't the original $100,000 bet. This check, made out to Columbia University's Linguistics Department, bore the seal of the Cultural Bridge Scholarship Foundation he'd established. "This represents more than money," Richard announced to the assembled crowd. "It represents my education in recognizing excellence wherever it appears, regardless of the packaging it arrives in." His voice carried the humility of someone who'd been fundamentally changed. Sometimes the person serving you is serving up exactly what the world needs most, if you're wise enough to recognize it. Marcus Brooks joined them on stage, presenting Keisha with a custom crystal nameplate that caught the light like captured starfire. Dr. Keisha Williams, Director of International Relations. It acknowledged both her current achievement and her approaching doctoral completion. The surprises continued cascading like a waterfall of recognition. The elderly Russian professor appeared, moving slowly but proudly to the microphone. Behind him walked a dozen other elderly immigrants, a multilingual senior conversation group that now met weekly at the restaurant. "In Russia, we have a saying," he announced in his thick accent. "When the student is ready, the teacher appears. But sometimes, when the world is ready, students become teachers for everyone." He presented Keisha with a published collection of poems about hope and second chances, written in both Russian and English, his grief transformed into art, his loss becoming a gift for others. The Japanese technology executives had flown in specifically for this evening. They presented Keisha with their newly created Cultural Bridge Partner of the Year award, a beautiful crystal sculpture representing connection across continents. "Williams-san has redefined what partnership means in global business," the lead executive announced. "She taught us that true communication requires not just language skills, but heart wisdom." But the moment that brought tears to every eye came when Maria and James, the restaurant workers inspired by Keisha's example, took the stage. "We enrolled in community college language programs using scholarships from the foundation," Maria announced, her voice shaking with emotion. "Keisha didn't just change her own life, she showed us we could change ours too." The cascade of recognition continued. Presentations from the German pharmaceutical company offering European market consulting. The Chinese tech firm requested cultural advisory services. 3 different universities are extending guest lecturing opportunities. Media coverage montaged across the screens. CNN International Business Segment, Harvard Business Review feature article, LinkedIn Learning course development offers. The local news anchor called it a story that redefines the American dream for the modern age. The restaurant itself had evolved beyond recognition. Le Ciel now hosted official embassy dinners and international trade negotiations, with cultural competency as its signature service. Flags from partner nations lined the walls alongside testimonials in 15 languages. Children from the local community center performed songs in multiple languages, part of a cultural education program Keisha had developed. Their innocent voices filled the room with hope for a more connected future. Through video connection, Keisha's mother appeared on the main screen, now cancer-free and auditing linguistics courses at Columbia. "I'm learning Spanish to surprise my daughter," she announced with pride that radiated through the screen. "She's been carrying the dreams for both of us long enough." The symbolic moment everyone would remember came when Marcus unveiled the restaurant's cultural heritage display. The original notepad where Keisha had taken Richard's order was now framed, surrounded by translations of respect in 25 languages. "This notepad represents transformation," Marcus explained. "From judgment to recognition, from assumption to understanding, from division to connection." Documentary crews from National Geographic had been filming throughout the evening for their Hidden Genius series. The story would eventually reach millions, inspiring similar recognition programs worldwide. Richard's final transformation moment came as he addressed the audience one last time. "I spent my life believing success looked a certain way, came from certain places, wore certain clothes. Keisha taught me that excellence doesn't announce itself with credentials. It reveals itself through character." His company's diversity initiative had become the gold standard for international business. The Keisha Protocol for Cultural Competency Training was now used by over 200 corporations globally. The evening concluded with a multilingual blessing for international peace and understanding. Keisha led phrases in all 9 languages while the audience responded in their native tongues. The sound was symphonic, human connection given voice across every barrier that had ever divided the world. But the image that would linger longest was Keisha, holding the worn poetry book from the Russian professor, standing beside the framed notepad where her journey had begun. Past dreams supporting present reality, present success inspiring future possibilities. Time-lapse footage showed the restaurant's complete transformation into a certified cultural diplomacy center. What had started as humiliation had become the foundation for an institution that would change how the world approached cross-cultural business. As the evening ended, Keisha stood on the terrace where she'd once processed her shock at being recognized. Now she looked out over the city with different eyes, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who had learned to value herself independent of others' recognition. The linguistics textbook from her locker now sat in a place of honor in her new office, alongside her business materials and the poetry book that had become her talisman. Dreams deferred, but not abandoned. Hope suspended, but never extinguished. The Keisha Williams Institute for Cultural Intelligence would soon open its doors, training business leaders worldwide in the art of human connection across cultural divides. Recognition had finally arrived, but more importantly, Keisha had learned she'd been worthy of it all along. 1 year later, Columbia University's graduation ceremony sparkled under late spring sunshine. Among the sea of black robes and mortarboards sat Keisha Williams, defending her dissertation before a packed auditorium. Hidden Human Capital, Economic Impact of Multilingual Inclusion in Corporate America. Her research, built on lived experience and empirical data, provided proof for what she'd always known. Linguistic diversity drives innovation and revenue growth by margins that stunned even her committee. In the audience sat an impossible constellation of lives she'd touched. Richard Blackstone in the front row transformed from antagonist to advocate. Marcus Brooks beaming with paternal pride, the Japanese executives who'd flown in from Tokyo, the elderly Russian professor clutching his published poetry, Maria now in her 3rd semester studying chemistry and Spanish. "Dr. Williams," the committee chair announced, "you pass with highest honors." The title felt different now. Not validation from others, but recognition of work completed, growth achieved, potential finally given room to flourish. Cut to the restaurant, now internationally recognized as a model for inclusive excellence in hospitality. Tour groups visited weekly to study their hiring practices, their cultural competency training, their revolutionary approach to recognizing hidden talent. The Cultural Bridge Scholarship Foundation had grown beyond anyone's dreams. $2.5 million now supported 75 students from similar backgrounds across 15 universities. Each scholarship recipient carried forward the lesson Keisha had learned. Circumstances don't define potential, they only delay its expression. Richard's company had become the gold standard for diversity in international business. The Keisha Protocol for cross-cultural communication was taught at business schools worldwide. Companies implementing her methods reported 31% improvement in international client satisfaction and 23% higher revenue growth from global partnerships. But the real magic happened in small moments. The Language Bridge program connected recent immigrants with conversation partners and job opportunities. Former refugees found their voices. Talented individuals hiding in service industries discovered pathways to careers that matched their abilities. Keisha's consulting company now worked with the United Nations, World Bank, and international development organizations. Her office walls displayed thank you letters in dozens of languages from businesses that had avoided costly cultural misunderstandings through her training. The numbers told the story that personal testimonies made real. 42% of service workers had college degrees. 28% of recent immigrants were overqualified for their current positions. Companies with multilingual leadership showed 23% higher international revenue growth. But statistics couldn't capture the human cost of unrecognized potential. Right now, across America, brilliant minds were serving coffee, cleaning offices, delivering packages, and waiting tables. Dreams deferred by circumstances beyond their control. Talents hidden behind uniforms that made them invisible to those who could change their trajectories. The next time someone serves you, pause. Ask yourself, what extraordinary gifts might they be carrying that our world hasn't recognized yet? Look for the Keishas hiding in plain sight around you. Start conversations, learn stories, discover the vast potential waiting for someone brave enough to see beyond surface assumptions. If you're in hiring positions, recruit for potential, not just pedigree. Create pathways for hidden talent to emerge. Skills matter more than schools. Character counts more than connections. Support multilingual education in your community. Fund scholarships for first-generation college students. Advocate for skills-based hiring in your organization. Champion policies that create bridges instead of barriers. Companies following the Keisha Protocol report dramatic improvements. 31% better international client satisfaction, 67% reduction in cross-cultural miscommunication, 89% of scholarship recipients graduating in their class's top quarter. But beyond the statistics lies a deeper truth. Every person has a story worth hearing. Every story contains value worth recognizing. Every recognition can change a life trajectory, and those ripples extend far beyond individual transformation. Imagine a world where talent is nurtured regardless of circumstances, where brilliance is recognized wherever it appears, where everyone gets the chance to contribute their gifts to our shared human story. The closing scene brings everything full circle. Keisha, now a visiting professor at Columbia, receives a call from Maria, the former hostess who earned her PhD in chemistry using foundation support and now runs a green technology startup. The cycle continues. Keisha connects Maria with international investors using the same cultural bridge-building skills that launched her own transformation. Recognition creates more recognition. Excellence lifting excellence. One phone call at a time, one connection at a time, one recognized talent at a time, the world changes. True wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's recognizing what others have to offer and giving them the platform to share it with the world. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves recognition for their gifts. Comment about a time someone surprised you with hidden talents. Like if you think we need more leaders who see potential in unexpected places. Every recognition matters. Every connection counts. Every bridge built makes the world a little smaller, a little kinder, a little more human. Start today, look around, see who's waiting to be seen. The next Keisha might be closer than you think.